The town of Dustwood always whispered about Caleb Turner, the rich rancher who owned more land than anyone could ride across in a week. A man both admired and envied, whose name carried weight like the rolling thunder before a storm. Yet behind his wealth and iron-backed reputation, Caleb lived with a gnawing doubt he had learned through the years that money drew all kinds of people to his doorstep, but not always for the right reasons. So when he hired a poor young widow named Clara Hayes to help around his homestead after his foreman insisted the place needed a woman's hand, Caleb devised a test, a dangerous little game meant to tell him whether her kindness was genuine or just another angle for survival. And that test began on a stormy evening when he came home, collapsed into his chair by the fire, and let his eyes fall shut as if sleep had claimed him. Clara had lost nearly everything when her husband passed, left with nothing but a small boy and the tattered pride she stitched together day by day. So she worked with quiet dignity, never asking Caleb for more than the wages promised, though every neighbor whispered that she must surely aim to charm her way into the rancher's fortune. But Caleb, determined to know the truth, sat as still as stone that evening, breathing shallow and steady, feigning sleep, waiting to see what she would do if she believed no eyes were upon her. At first, Clara simply tidied the room, placing logs on the fire, humming softly the way mothers do to soothe themselves when the world has been too cruel. But then she noticed the faint wince across Caleb's brow, the tension in his jaw, and without hesitation she knelt beside him, her hands trembling not from fear but from compassion, and she whispered words he could barely make out, prayers for strength, for healing, for peace upon a man who carried burdens alone, though the town thought him unshakable. And as she carefully placed a cool cloth across his forehead, Caleb felt his heart stumble in his chest, realizing she tended to him not because of what he owned, but because she could not stand to see another soul suffer when she had already watched death take the man she once loved. Still he lay motionless, forcing himself to endure the guilt of his own deception as Clara rose and looked around the cabin, her eyes falling on the untouched supper she had prepared earlier. And rather than serve herself, she took a small portion, barely enough to still her hunger, leaving the rest for him, whispering that a hard-working man deserved to eat first. And when her boy came toddling to her side, asking why they couldn't have more, Clara kissed his cheek and told him that kindness meant giving before taking, that life gave back in strange ways when you lived with honor. And Caleb, hearing every word, felt his riches turn hollow compared to the wealth of her spirit. Minutes stretched into hours, and still she watched over him, adjusting the blanket when the fire crackled low, keeping vigil as though she owed him more than coin for her labor. And when she finally thought sleep had claimed her employer, she sank to her knees, pressing her hands together, and whispered a confession to the silence. Lord, if he never sees me as more than a servant, that is enough. But let me prove myself worthy, not for his wealth, not for his name, but for the chance to show I am still capable of giving love when the world has taken so much. Those words struck Caleb harder than any bullet or branding iron ever had, for in that moment he knew his little test had been a cruel trick, one unworthy of a man who prided himself on honor. And when he could bear it no longer, he opened his eyes, startling Clara and her child, his voice rough but steady as he admitted the truth, that he had pretended to sleep, that he had sought to uncover her heart, and what he found shamed him, because he had doubted a woman whose strength outshone every ounce of gold he owned. Clara, cheeks burning, tried to rise, to stammer an apology for overstepping, but Caleb caught her hand and held it firm, telling her she had nothing to apologize for, that he was the one who needed forgiveness for treating her heart like something to be measured and tested. And as the boy looked on, wide-eyed, Caleb promised he would never again doubt the purity of their presence in his life. From that night forward, the ranch no longer echoed with the lonely steps of a man too proud to admit he needed more than land and cattle, for Clara and her son filled it with warmth, with laughter, with the kind of humble faith that can turn even the hardest man into a believer, and the town that once whispered gossip now whispered awe at how the richest rancher in Dustwood had been taught the true measure of wealth, not by gold or fences, but by the heart of a poor widow who asked for nothing yet gave everything. And dear viewers, if this story stirred your heart, if you believe too that love, kindness, and integrity outweigh riches and pride, then don't just leave with the lesson. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories that remind us that the greatest treasures are not found in vaults or bank accounts, but in the unseen acts of compassion that change lives forever. Because every subscription helps us share these tales with more souls who need them, and your support keeps the spirit of storytelling alive.